Today we'll be looking into the contributions of Radha Kamal Mukherjee. Born into a Bengali Brahmin family in the year 1889, he was a pioneer in areas of social ecology, interdisciplinary research, and social structure of values. Now, in his early life, the famines of Madras and Orissa during the early 20th century had a lasting impact on him, and he was deeply moved by the pictures of human skeletons on verge of starvation and death. Now, this was further impacted by the Bengal famine, which was witnessed by Calcutta in 1942 and 43. Now, these sad pictures of human sufferings goes through his analysis of Indian society and his writings also. He completed his honours course in English and History from Presidency College, Calcutta, and it was here where he began to read the books of Comte Spencer, Lester Ward Hobhouse, etc., who were the leading sociologists of Europe and America at that point of time. Later, he launched himself into the area of adult education, which remained his interest till the end. Now, at the same period, the country was going through a political and cultural upheaval, and according to Mukherjee, these moments changed the scale of values, and changes were seen beyond the institutions of government, taking the form of a literary and artistic renaissance, which slowly took the form of mass movement. And to help this process, he started an adult evening school in the year 1906 in the slums of Calcutta, and he wrote simple texts for adult education which sold in thousands. Now, this school became a community center, and even the local physicians started taking interest in this movement of social education. It was a free education without any sort of fees, and even the children of the slums were taught in the school. His face-to-face contact with misery, degradation in the slums of Calcutta turned the focus of his interest towards the disciplines of sociology and economics, and he wrote that there was a definite call in the country for the tasks and responsibilities of education of the masses, and that call should be answered by an Indian student best through the knowledge of social sciences. He was impressed by fiery political speeches of Bipin Chandra Pal, who was one of the Congress extremists. But his main interest always remained educational rather than political, and he and his friends called themselves ministers of the poor, and they dressed poorly, giving up Western dresses like shirts, coats, shoes, etc. In the year 1910, Mukherjee goes back to his old college in Berhampur as a teacher in economics. And during this period, he wrote his early works in economics, such as The Foundations of Indian Economics. And also his interest in social ecology and the study of regions also originated during his time period in the college. The principal of this college was also deeply interested in science, especially botany, and teachers including Mukherjee spent a lot of time collecting specimens of plants and insects of all kinds and studying them. Now, this experience developed Mukherjee's interest in ecology, and he became aware of its link with human community. At the same time, Mukherjee also became the editor of the renowned Bengali monthly Upasana. He wrote for this monthly regularly and kept in touch with the literary development and Bengali literature. In the 1915s, when there were persecutions by British government, Mukherjee was once arrested for a day, and all his adult schools were liquidated. The charges against him were that he was a terrorist or had sympathy with terrorism under the disguise of adult education. Later, he was offered a position in Lahore College in Punjab, which he took up, thus putting an end to his interest in politics. And later, he goes back to the University of Calcutta, and he continues there for 5 years, and he teaches subjects of economics, sociology, and political philosophy. And in the year 1921, he goes on to the University of Lucknow as a professor and head of the Department of Economics and Sociology. On the very day when the university started functioning. Now, he introduced an integrated approach in economics, sociology, and anthropology in both research and teaching in Lucknow University. And according to Mukherjee, using comparative methods and study of social sciences in India must aim at the scientific study of the race and origin of culture. Mukherjee taught economics and sociology in Lucknow University for nearly 30 years, and he also became the Vice Chancellor and Director of JK Institute of Sociology and Human Relations of the university. Now, in his teachings and throughout his writings, he emphasized the need for mutual interaction between social sciences on the one hand, and between social sciences and physical sciences on the other. For example, Indian economics is modeled on British economics, and this neglected the traditional caste networks in indigenous business like handicrafts and banking. Based on the British economics, the economic development in India was mainly viewed as an extension of monetary economics or market phenomena. And this Western model focused on the urban industrial centers, completely neglecting the caste-based structure of Indian economy. So he felt that this Western model of economic analysis was not suitable in a complete analysis or understanding of Indian economic structure. He also made a micro-level analysis of rural economy, land problems, problems of working class, intercaste tensions, urbanizations, etc. Now, he wrote around 53 books on several issues, and the basic nature of his writing was the integration of social sciences. And he argued that human life is whole and it cannot be studied in fragments, and values become an integral part of man, and these values are to be included in understanding the people and society. To mention few of his works, like The Social Structure of Values, The Foundation of Indian Economics, Principles of Comparative Economics, The Culture and Art of India, The Economic History of India, The Community of Communities, Indian Working Classes, etc. All these works give us different explanations on the structure of Indian society and various aspects of rural India, and also the problems of Indian working class. And most importantly, the structure of values speaks about different aspects of values and how these values have an impact on the day-to-day life of individual, at the same time the overall functioning of the society. Discussing the relationship between economics and social behavior in his institutional theory of economics, he argued that the Western adopted economic models had failed to inculcate the system of caste in its analysis of the Indian society. That is, traditionally, Indian society had a caste-based system of economic transactions. That is, the guilds in India were operating in a non-competitive economic system, and the norms of economic activity were derived from the Hindu religion. That is, the occupations of different people were fixed on the basis of their caste, and thus each caste had its own monopolized economic activities. And at the same time, there were interdependence of people on one another, because each caste groups performed different occupations, and they also had their own specialization. So, this Western model of economics, according to Mukherjee, gave only a partial view of India. Thus, he says that for the real understanding of rural India, the economic values should be analyzed with reference to the social norms. Before we proceed further, now what are these values? Values are nothing but socially approved desires or goals that are internalized through the process of conditioning and socialization. These values help one live in a socially acceptable way. So, coming back, in rural Indian society, there were guilds. Now, guilds are association of craftsmen or merchants that are formed to provide protection for the workers. Indian society had a guild of blacksmiths, traders, carpenters, etc., and they had a monopoly over their occupation. From the Indian context, this monopoly can be termed as a caste-based monopoly. That is, only particular people belonging to a particular caste or guild performed the occupations or performed certain occupations, and the aspects of these occupations were passed on from generation to generation within the same guild or caste, and thus the monopoly was established. So there was no competition in the economic system. Now, for example, a guild of blacksmiths, now they had the monopoly of their occupations, and the various aspects of that occupation will be passed on to their offsprings from generation to generation. So this monopoly retains within the same guild, and thus it does not result in a competitive economic scenario. Here, the economic activities were governed by the norms or values associated with the religion or caste. Now, these values, which are passed on from generation to generation, get internalized by the people, and they act accordingly so that they are accepted and not outcasted. Now, for example, the distance prescribed to be maintained by the lower caste while meeting the upper caste, the non-acceptance of food by upper caste people from lower caste, are all part of the system, and they are some sort of values which have been passed on from generation to generation and continue to exist in society. And similar values are also applicable to the economic system of rural India. So he says that there is a correlation between social behavior and economic behavior. For instance, a hungry upper caste Hindu would never eat beef. Likewise, an Orthodox Muslim or Jew would not eat pork, no matter however urgent the need for food was. That is to say, one would withstand the hunger but would not consume something that which was against his or her values. Now, likewise, an upper caste would not perform an occupation which was meant to be the occupation of the lower caste, no matter what the situation was. So he says that the economic behavior and social behavior are interrelated. That is to say, people would restrict themselves to certain activities or to certain behaviors which are against the values that they own or that they possess. So there was a caste-based monopoly in the economic structure of Indian society. And the economic behavior of the individuals coexisted with the social values that they possessed or practiced. Harmonious development of man requires that he live with other members of the community and also with the nature or environment or ecology. So social ecology is an interaction between different factors like geological, geographical, and biological factors which together contribute to what can be called as ecological zone. So in simple words, social ecology is the study of all aspects of reciprocal relations between man and his environment. Now, this ecology is also conditioned by the social, economic, and political factors. Now, people settle in a place and they develop those places. For instance, the migrant population who settled in the valley contributed to the development of Harappan civilization. Now, this civilization is not an overnight development, but rather it is a result of decades of works and developmental activities. At the same time, they have their own unique system of administration and life. Now, when they get displaced due to variety of reasons, either natural or man-made, there is a loss of the value system in place and a new system replaces the old system. Likewise, the process of urbanization and industrialization led to mindless exploitation of natural resources, and it had taken a toll on the environment. That is, it has resulted in exhaustion of several natural resources on one side, and on the other, the use of chemicals and pesticides on the farmland has resulted in soil losing its natural fertility. Thus, it in turn affects the agricultural production. And other issues like overgrazing, destruction of trees and shrubs, etc., contribute to serious imbalances in the biophysical constitution of the region, impairing the natural cycle of the nature. Thus, the removal of vegetation brings about a chain of unfavorable reactions like denudation of the topsoil, fall in the underground water level, increase of aridity, etc. And these lead to serious and continuous agricultural deterioration. And there would be gross imbalance in different regions within the country. Thus, Mukherjee was against economic development at the expense of environment. And also, he stressed that traditional crafts and skills should not be discarded, but they should be revamped for attaining economic growth. So he stressed that economic growth should take place without causing damage to the environment or the ecology. So he advocated on the conservation of forest as the cutting of trees subjects the soil to the fury of floods and reduces the fertility of the soil. The topsoil, which is washed away by floods or excess rainfall, cannot be replenished. Therefore, the forest and woods of India were an ecological asset. Mukherjee also referred to the danger of monocultivation, that is, raising a single cash crop, such as cotton or sugarcane, to the detriment of rotation of crops. Now, he says that such practices as deforestation and monocultivation disturbed the fragile ecosystem and gave rise to several environmental problems. And every year, some parts of India, especially in the north, suffer either from floods or from droughts. And of course, the cyclones of coastal regions are beyond human control, but the man-made disasters such as depletion of natural resources through deforestations, etc., can be slowed down or prevented. So he stressed on the need for a balance between economic growth and ecological fitness. So he was against the rapid exploitation of environment for economic gains. With increasing gap between rich and poor, Mukherjee also noticed that there was a wide gap between different regions within the country in terms of development. That is, not all regions of the country were developed, and development was focused to certain regions alone. So Mukherjee felt that this had to be changed, and equitable distribution of wealth and resources, not only between different sections of population, but also between different regions, could bring a balanced development. That is, balanced development is all inclusive. Every infrastructure or every development has to reach every nook and corner of the society and also all sections of the population without leaving out anyone. At the same time, Mukherjee also stressed that urban development at the expense of village should always be checked. That is to say, the development should not be focused on one particular region or area, neglecting the other regions. And at the same time, the development of urban centers should not exploit or should not neglect the village or rural regions. So he says that if the infrastructures or any other developments are equally distributed among all regions, it would generally contribute to the overall development of the country and also the well-being of all the sections of population. If we take India as an example, what happens is when there is development, one society or one region develops while the other regions are generally neglected, or the technological advancement do not reach all the regions or every nook and corner of the society, and majority of the people are left out or marginalized. Say for example, the process of digitalization. This process neglects or marginalizes certain sections or certain regions within the country because of lack of internet connectivity or lack of computer literacy amongst the folks, or because of technological barriers. So what Mukherjee felt that development of certain regions and neglect of other regions is not the actual development. If there is development in one region, it has to diffuse and it has to reach all the sections of the population and also all the regions within the country. Only then there could be actual development, or only then the development can be called as a balanced development. And development should not be just focused on the haves, but it should attempt, or it should be in a position to include the have nots also, and help them grow or develop or evolve. Now, as the societies develop and as the aspect of urban societies come into this scenario, there are several problems, social as well as economic and other problems associated with the urban societies. So here, with the rapid industrialization and urbanization, there were waves of migrations taking place within the country, that is from rural areas to the urban areas or from rural areas to other developed areas or regions. That is, people started migrating in search of better jobs, better facilities, etc. This in turn resulted in the imbalanced distribution of population, resulting in some cities like Mumbai, Chennai, etc. getting overly populated, which in turn resulted in the rise of urban slums. Though industrialization and urbanization brought together different groups of people, and indirectly it helped in reducing the caste-based practice of untouchability on one side, but on the other side it contributed towards the exploitation of the working class, like lack of proper working facilities, accommodations, pay, etc. And it also contributed to the development of child labor. Now, because of lack of pay, lack of accommodations, etc., people started living in open areas or other regions, which eventually developed as slums. Now, these slums began to evolve as centers of crime, gambling, and prostitutions, etc. So, it created an environment of problems which would eventually in the long run become a threat to the society as a whole. That is, creation of individuals with faulty socializations. Though today most of the industrial sectors and other private sectors provide good workplace conditions and accommodation facilities, the conditions of the working class has not changed much. For instance, the salary and the cost of living doesn't go hand in hand, and thus it causes various sorts of burdens for the average working class family, and they would not be in a position to meet other basic needs of the family members. On the other hand, the lack of employment opportunities leads to underemployment, and in some other cases, it also attracts the unemployed youths towards crime world, which eventually could pose a threat to the entire country. Here, what we need to focus is the people in the unorganized sector and unemployed. These are the groups who are worst affected, and their standard of living is also low and most of them live in the slum regions. And these slums lack minimum civic facilities, and they are prone to various health issues, exploitations, etc. So, unless you find a solution to cope with these problems or to provide better opportunities to the citizens or the eligible ones, the social problems would continue to exist in different ways. And if you look at today's society, there are problems of drug addictions, crimes, the problem of prostitutions, killings, kidnappings, etc., various sorts. So, until and unless you put a check on these issues, definitely one cannot bring a end to these crimes or urban social problems. The checks means not just in papers but in actions. So coming to his major work, that is Theory of Values. So what are these values? Values are socially approved desires or goals or ways of acting that are internalized through the process of conditioning and socialization. These values generate subjective preferences, standards, and aspirations. That is, the values have an influence upon what an individual is supposed to do and not, and moreover, it helps man in orienting his desires or goals and actions in a socially acceptable manner. So, values in a way help in maintaining social harmony, order, etc. Now, these values are derived from life, from environment, from self, from society, from culture, from ideals, from transcendent dimensions of human existence and experience. So, human nature in the social environment is molded by values, ideals, and norms that which are unique to humans. And Mukherjee says that human values emerge due to two factors. The first, impingement of society and its meanings and norms on the fulfillment of individual needs or drives, and second, the introduction of his own awareness, choices, and judgments in need fulfillment. And these two processes are interdependent. So here Mukherjee differentiates between intrinsic, that is something that is naturally essential, and instrumental values, something that serves as a means of pursuing one's aim. So according to Mukherjee, religion and morality are concerned with intrinsic values, and science and technology concerned with instrumental values of life. The latter are divided and subdivided as technological civilization perfects its control over things, persons, and events. So he argued that modern technological civilization reduces striving man to mere job, disassociated from the values and aspirations, tasks and obligations that which formerly cemented the bonds of society and provided opportunities for self-discipline, self-maturation, etc. So that is to say, these modern societies have reduced a man to just a like or a kind of machine who is more bothered about economic gains and less concerned about the values. So, one could see the decline of values in people's life, and lack of concerns or sympathy or empathy to fellow human beings. So here Mukherjee says that simple transactions like taking food, wearing dress, or greeting others were value based or normatively conditioned behavior. Now, each society has a distinctive culture and its values and norms that which guide the behavior. So these values play an important role in the integration and fulfillment of a man's basic impulses and desires in a stable and consistent manner. That is, the selfish desires and self interest are restrained, and people act for the collective welfare of the people or the general whole. So, human needs are transformed into social values and are internalized in the minds of members of the society. So, values are not a product of subjective or individualistic aspirations alone, they are also objectively grounded in humankind's social aspirations and desires. So, values are both general and objective. They are measurable by empirical methods. For example, when we say values with regard to food consumption, so these values are based on the religious ideas of being vegetarian and non-vegetarian, and once again in non-vegetarian, a beef consuming non-vegetarian and pork consuming non-vegetarian, etc. So these values vary from person to person on the basis of certain principles which they follow or practice in life. To add to this, Mukherjee also says that values are not just religious in nature, but values are beyond that. There could be social values like community welfare, the social psychological values of sympathy and empathy, the values like equality, liberty, secularism, etc. Now, these values like liberty, equality, sympathy, empathy are universally applicable, but they may not be universally practiced because many people are obsessed with self and they put their self-interest first than the community welfare, or they may be lacking in the sympathy empathy quotient. So if we take example of India, we speak about liberty, equality, secularism, democracy, etc. It's there, but when it comes to practice, not all are equally treated. There are biasness, there are unethical practices, still the practice of untouchability, caste-based discriminations, gender-based discriminations, etc. are there. So something which is universally applicable may not be universally practiced. And values are both individual and social responses and attitudes. Certain values are shared among larger sections of the society through the use of symbols or signs. Like, for example, national flag is a symbol that subjectively brings in a feeling of national sentiment. The symbol of cross with a skull symbolizes the meaning of danger or threat, and the meaning is shared among all the members across the society. And they are social values, while individual values are personal values which one holds. So Mukherjee believed that mankind had evolved a developmental pattern of human needs, values, and virtues at different stages of human life cycle. Self definitions, actualizations, and verifications are lifted to the level of exclusive universal values and virtues at the developmental life phases. So, values are essentially social products and at the same time involve the individual's assumptions of certain common goals and purposes of the social milieu that have become a part of him. So, values offer easy, stable, and effective guidance to him or her through life in spite of conflicting biological and social needs or goals and severe interpersonal tensions. Love and procreation are profoundly affected by custom, standard of living, and personal scale of ego involvement and ideal satisfaction. Appetite, love, family raising, and kinship all become cultural values for man, refashioning the raw materials of human biology, that is, the biological and the social or cultural values, blend and fuse with one another. It is on the basis of such integration of sex, food, play, and security, and life maintenance and enhancement in general with other social or cultural interests and values that man can drive authentic and permanent satisfactions from them in society. So both need and fulfillment are modified by social norms. Mukherjee says that values are accompanied by disvalues. Now, disvalues are nothing but a negative value, and they could arise due to individuals' lag and also due to social shortcomings. So, Mukherjee says disvalues do not represent a part of the inner core of the self, but rather blockages and diminutions of its potentialities. These comprise efforts to seek gratification in a twisted, disgusted, or convert manner in the absence of a normal or legitimate ways of fulfillment due to special conditions and circumstances of past and present life history, and that can be accompanied by loss of capacity for self-regulation, self-actualization, and self-transcendence. So here, values are associated with fulfillment, self-competence, and joy, whereas the disvalues are associated with regression, fear, and loneliness. So man creates, nurtures, and achieves the polarities of values and disvalues, very high and low values, harmonious and discordant values, adult and infantile values. And these values fuse into a dialectical and dynamic unity at the highest dimensions of personality development. For example, individuals deviate by non-conforming to certain values, and so do the institutions deviate from values. For example, indulging in corrupt practices, violation of protocols, the formation of terror groups, etc., on the basis of misconceived notions. So, Mukherjee stresses on reintegration of the deviant individuals and groups by correcting their disvalues and bringing back to the social order. At the same time, all deviations cannot be termed as disvalues. For instance, social reformers question certain practices and try to bring about social change. for instance, the practice of untouchability, caste discrimination, etc. And these deviations from the set patterns were required to bring about equality and welfare of all. So, such deviations are required for social welfare and they cannot be considered as disvalues. Mukherjee developed a hierarchy of values by keeping spiritual values at the top of the hierarchy, followed by social and biological values in descending order. So, in biological values, it's about health, fitness, efficiency, security, continuity, etc. While in social values, it is about wealth, status, love, justice, etc. While spiritual values, it's about truth, harmony, holiness, etc. So he believed that intrinsic, inherent, and transcendent values had supremacy over instrumental, extrinsic, or operational values. So, in his work, The Dynamics of Moral and the Dimensions of Human Values, Mukherjee stresses on attainment of universal brotherhood, giving away selfish attitudes, and he says that it is required for the overall development of the society. India has a rich cultural heritage, and each culture is unique from one another. The people here share a common bond of unity, and people belonging to different cultures, races, etc., live peacefully with mutual interactions. So, Mukherjee's writings on Indian art, architecture, history, and culture opines that harmony as the basic value of life, and he says that this harmony is illustrated in Indian scheme of life and Indian culture views man as a responsible member of the community, and people here do not live in isolation. So the Indian values are embedded in the arts, the Ashokan edicts, the viharas, stupas, etc. And they are the link between ethics, religious and social values, and also the spirit of tolerance of diversities. The religions like Buddhism and Jainism emphasized on the ultimate truth rather than on a particular set of beliefs or rituals, and they have been one of the feature of Indian religions. And more importantly, it was through peaceful means that these religions like Jainism and Buddhism spread beyond the geographic limits of India. Thus, the point here is that Indian influence, like the traditions of yoga, Ayurveda, etc., spread across the world through friendship and goodwill and not through war or conquest. Mukherjee attempted to explain the values of universal civilization in his general theory of society. Now, he opined that evolution could be studied from three interrelated dimensions. They are biological evolution. Now, this biological evolution facilitated the rise and development of civilizations. And at the same time, human beings, considered to be the most intelligent creatures amongst the living beings, are in a position to modify or alter the environment to suit their lifestyles or to fulfill their needs. They exploit or change the conditions of the environment. Unlike animals, animals usually adapt to the environment and they do not modify the environment. But human beings, on the other hand, they alter several conditions of the environment and they bring in several sorts of changes to the environment, and in the long run also to the societies or civilizations they are part of. So human beings are capable of overcoming competitions or conflicts, and they are capable of leading a harmonious and peaceful life. cooperating and interacting with fellow human beings. This is followed by psychosocial dimensions. So, here in psychosocial dimensions, usually people are depicted or identified within the framework of race, ethnicity, or nationhood. And human beings are considered to be obsessed with their self interest, self goals, etc. But Mukherjee believed that human beings, being the intelligent creatures, had the potentiality to overcome these self obsessions or self interest or self feelings, and they could attain universalization, or they could identify themselves with the larger groups, or rather than thinking about the self, they would be in a position to think about the welfare of the community as a whole. So, self centrism could be changed because the human beings have the potential for that. So, Mukherjee says that values vary from society to society, and these values may not be helpful in the present societies, and there should be something universally accepted values and principles for the human kinds to follow. Thus, the concept of equality, etc., arises, and everyone should be treated equally across the societies. And this is followed by spiritual dimensions, and he believed that every civilization had the spiritual dimensions within it, and human beings were scaling transcendental heights, overcoming their constraints of physical and material limitations. So he felt that the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in the 20th century upheld the values of liberty, equality, and importantly, the dignity of people across the countries or across the worlds. So these values become a universal value which is followed or which will be followed across the societies, irrespective of races, caste, class, etc. Moreover, he felt that the disparities of wealth and power between different countries are to be reduced, and until and unless poverty persisted or political oppression continued, the overall integral evolution of mankind was not possible. And the persisting human awareness of misery in the world would stimulate the search for universal values and norms. To conclude, it could be said that Mukherjee stressed on the need for an interdisciplinary approach towards the analysis and study of the society, and to understand the various aspects of society in detail. And he also stressed upon the need for equitable distribution and balanced development, that is to say, equitable distribution of wealth or infrastructure or anything across all sections of population and all regions of the society. And only if the development is equally distributed across the societies, and only if it reaches the nook and corner of the society and all populations, only then there could be a balanced development. He also stressed upon the problems or social problems in urban societies, and he wanted to find a solution towards these problems to put an end to it. So he felt that the development at the expense of rural areas must be checked so as to put an check towards imbalanced population distribution and also the growth of slums in urban areas. More importantly, he stressed on the role of values and their interrelationship between social actions, economic behaviors, etc. So, he found out a direct correlation between the values that the people hold and the kind of behavior that they depict within the framework of society. So, basically, he tried to say that the values played an important role in determining the behaviors of individuals. Now, it could be said that some of Mukherjee's work were more philosophical in nature, but even then, he focused towards major aspects or major problems found within the societies, and he wanted to bring about a change within the structure as well as the living conditions of the members of the society.